Okay, everyone. So thank you again for being with us today. Gonna get started. Again, welcome to our monthly session. So a little bit about our center. We are the Pacific Inclusive Education Research and Resources Center, or PEER for short. PEER is managed by faculty and staff at the Center on Disability Studies, located on the University of Hawaii at Manoa campus. The overarching goal of our center is to nurture untapped talents through inclusive practices. And to reach this goal, we host monthly speaker series as well as an in-person symposium that focus on building awareness on neurodiversity and twice exceptionality. So our speaker series and symposiums are made possible through funding from the U.S. Department of Education Jacob Che Javits Gifted and Talented Education Program grant. Each month, our speaker series will focus on a different topic and perspectives from well-known speakers in different areas of inclusion, neurodiversity, and education. I'm really happy today to introduce our speaker, which is Dr. Claire Hughes. Dr. Hughes is a professor of special gifted and twice exceptional education at Cleveland State University. Previously, she was a professor of elementary and special education at the College of Coastal Georgia, faculty director of special education programs at Canterbury Christ Church University in the United Kingdom, and a Fulbright Scholar to Greece. She is the recipient of an award from the National Association of Gifted Children and is president-elect of the Association of the Gifted, Council for Exceptional Children. Today, Dr. Hughes will delve into the concept of Ikigai, a Japanese philosophy that translates to a reason for being, as a powerful framework for simultaneously nurturing the unique strengths and mediating the impacts of the disability of twice exceptional students at secondary and post-secondary levels. So she's going to explore the intersection where students' passions, talents, societal needs, and vocational aspirations converge. Educators can unlock this pathway to engagement, motivation, and fulfillment of twice exceptional learners. So really excited about today's presentation today. And regarding, I know some of you or many of you may have questions for our awesome speaker. And so if you can leave your questions into the chat box, she will be going through the chat box periodically through her presentation and definitely at the end of her presentation, and we'll work towards addressing your questions. So if you have any questions, please leave it into the chat box today. So without further ado, I think we can get started. Is everybody, I think I got a message about audio. Is everyone able to hear okay? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to spotlight Dr. Hughes. Thank you again, Dr. Hughes, for being with us today.
Thank you so much. You have no idea how much I wish I were genuinely physically with y'all today. It's very warm and humid here, and so the idea of being in Hawaii sounds wonderful. But I am very glad to be here and to have y'all thinking about and interested in Twice Exceptional is very exciting to me. So I'm thrilled that I have an opportunity to talk to y'all about it and then to answer some questions at the very end. So I'm going to be talking about this concept of Ikigai, which is a way of thinking about working with twice exceptional learners. And for some reason, oh, no, there we are. All right. So Ikigai is this, as I said, a Japanese concept, and it's this intersection where between four different aspects. So the aspects are the doing the thing that you love, which is passion, interest, and it's kind of personally driven. And then doing the thing that you're good at, which is ability driven, which is talents, which is strengths. So you've got sort of the individual perspective and then the strengths based approach as well. But it's also connected with the outside world. So the outside world is things that the world needs. So figuring out what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs. So there's an external component there. And then doing the thing you can be paid for, because what we're talking about for Ikigai is that reason for being, which is the idea of career, or the idea of vocation. And you can see what happens when you in this wonderful little graphic, that Ikigai is the coming together of all four of those pieces. So if you're doing what you love and you're good at it, that is a passion, but it can just be an individual thing. And if you're doing the thing that you can be paid for and the world needs, that can be a vocation, but it might not be what you love or you're good at. So when we think about combining all of these things, and I think about for twice exceptional kids because they have some interesting challenges and they have some interesting ways of approaching when we think about approaching a child with a disability or a child with learning differences and how we can begin to do this. Now, the concept of Ikigai is not just limited to twice exceptional. I want to emphasize that. One of the things I talk about special education, so I'm a professor of special education, and I talk a lot about the idea that special ed isn't all that special. It's really good teaching, but it's essential for some kids. So I almost wish that we could change the name and call it essential education because it takes strategies that benefit lots of other kids, but without these ideas, it's these particular children, these children couldn't learn, can't learn. So the idea of Ikigai for twice exceptional kids is good for all kids, but it's absolutely essential for twice exceptional kids. And I'll talk about why in just a moment. So one of the things I'm going to ask y'all questions, I'm going to show y'all some pictures, and I want you to, through the chat or something like that, I want you to tell me what's missing and what's there. So we've talked about twice exceptional kids. So some of y'all may be familiar with this concept of this video, that this image that was around a couple of years ago about the dress. I don't know if anyone has seen this, but some of y'all are mistaken and you think that this dress is black and blue. And some of you see this dress as white and gold. I'm very curious if y'all could put into the chat what color you see this dress as. Now, what's fascinating about this, white and gold. See, what's interesting is many of y'all are saying blue and black, and then some of y'all are saying white and gold. And you can look at this and go, I happen to be in the white and gold group. I don't see black and blue at all. Like I can't even stumble over my words because I'm like, that's not black and blue. That's definitely white and gold. It might be in the shadows. I can definitely see it's in the shadow. But what's fascinating about this is that we literally see different things. So when we're talking about twice exceptional kids, we literally we see different things. And I think that has an important lesson for us because it's important to think about, are we seeing the strengths or are we seeing the challenge? What's interesting is that when we look at visual games, it's a use of negative space. So some of you may see the faces and some of you may see the vase. Now, what's different about the black and blue is that this is literally how the cones and rods in your eyes are constructed. I can't see black and blue if black and blue, even if I wanted to. I only see white and gold. And it has to do with the way my eyes are constructed. So I can't shift the way I see things. So for those of you who are seeing it as black and blue and you're like, how is she seeing white and gold? We can't see somebody else's perspective. There's a biological reason for seeing in different perspectives. For something like the optical illusions, we can look at the negative and then we look at the positive. We look at the negative space, we look at the white and we look at the dark, and we see different things when we do that. Can somebody tell me what you see here, what you think this is? What do y'all think? Person walking through snow. But there's a question mark, isn't it? A man walking a snowy mountain. I've got to tell you, in Georgia, they look at that and they're like, huh, what's that? I did that in Minnesota and they're like, well, it's obvious. They're walking through snow. Context is everything. So the way we see things is so very contextually oriented. So for those of y'all who are sitting in Hawaii, it does snow in Hawaii at different points, and I'm familiar with that, but it never snows in Southeast Georgia. So when people in Southeast Georgia look at this, they're not sure what they see because they don't have the context for it. So context is so important in terms of what we see. Escher was very, very good at playing with this positive and negative space, of seeing how things change when we start shifting, looking at positive and negative space. This is the logo of one of my favorite restaurants. Can anybody guess what the name of the restaurant is? And I go almost just for the logo. What do you think the name of the restaurant is? There you go. Jan, I like Jan's comments. Three doves. It's not really, it's, yep, Lisa, it is three birds. It's called Three Birds. And I like that, Desiree. It's actually Three Little Birds, which of course there's the song and all of that. But it's a genius respect of playing with that positive and negative space. And I think when we think about the focus, when we're looking, it does kind of look like a dolphin. When we look at kids, when we look at data, when we look at information, the two questions are, what is missing? What's the negative space? And then what is there? And in education, we do a really good job. And as humans, do a really good job of look at what's missing, but we don't always look at what's there. And so for twice exceptional kids, they live in both of those spaces of what is missing and what is there. So what we're going to do today, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do some activities. We're going to talk about strengths-based education, Ikigai. I'm going to talk a little bit about teaching twice exceptional, and we're going to talk a little bit about some resources and tools. And I will do my best to stay within our time limit. I don't think y'all want to stay with me for the next 3 hours, but I would love to sit and chat with you about all of these. I used to laugh that if anybody will sit still long enough, I can talk about twice exceptional kids. So a little bit about me. You're a little bit about my bio, but these are my labels. When we think about labels, labels are sort of give background to where somebody came from or give some details about them. So I got my undergraduate degree in marketing and business at the University of New Mexico, and then I got my master's in special ed and gifted from the University of New Mexico, and I taught in a twice exceptional program at Oñate Elementary School. Then I was so excited about twice exceptional, I went and got my doctorate in special ed and gifted at the College of William and Mary. And I taught and I created an integrated elementary special ed teacher preparation program at the College of Coastal Georgia. And I was a Fulbright scholar to Greece. And you heard a little bit about that. Now I am professor of special ed, gifted ed, and twice exceptional education at Cleveland State, which has the country's only twice exceptional teacher education program, which integrates both special ed and gifted ed. So I'm very excited. Those are my labels. But if you really want to, if you were teaching me or we were working together for any length of time, we have to go beyond the labels. We have to go, particularly for twice exceptional kids, we have to talk about what we love. And that love of things is really important. So what I'm going to do, because we're talking about neurodivergent kids, we're talking about kids who either have clean labels or don't have clean labels, but we're looking for what they can do and what we might want to recommend for them. So I want to show y'all a video, and it's such an important video that I'm going to spend about 8 minutes of my presentation time. I'm going to probably bring it down to 6 or so, but I'm going to spend some time in my presentation showing you this video because it's so important. I'm going to stop the video at the 4-minute mark, about 3-minute mark, and I'm going to ask you what you might recommend for this particular individual. So her name is Amanda. She is institutionalized. She is an adult. So this is a video of an adult, and it's an actual video that she put it together and she's institutionalized. So she's diagnosed with autism, she's institutionalized, and she is nonverbal. So she does not speak. And I'm going to ask you when I stop the video of what y'all might recommend for her in terms of interventions, what kinds of strengths you might see, what kinds of things you might try with her. So forgive me that I tried the video earlier and I think it's still blocked. Yep. It's not that it's blocked. There's nothing wrong with it.
Oh, Dr. Hughes, I think some of the menu bar and there's another dark screen that's being presented. Is it possible to move that over again? I know
Sure,
that,
that's probably the chat function. I didn't realize that y'all were seeing it. I really want to keep the chat going. Let me see. How about that? Is
yeah,
that better?
yeah, it's still somewhat blocking it. Oh, that's a little better now. It was blocking
Okay.
some of the words. That's why. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's all right.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Now,
you.
I'm going to warn y'all for this video for these first 3 minutes. You might get a little bored. And that's okay if you get a little bored. That's sort of the purpose. But I don't want you to go, oh, yeah, I got it. I want you to actually pay attention for 3 minutes if you could. So if you could stay engaged for 3 minutes, even though it's a little boring. Let me... All right. So in the chat, tell me what you see as a strategy you might use with her. What is something you might develop with her? What might you recommend for her? There we go. Allow student to STEM before, after lesson, or even a STEM break. Absolutely. Giving them a time for STEM. So you can STEM and here's some time. Good idea. All right. Anything else? Talking about self-regulation. Sure. Anyone else have any other ideas? Music therapy. Yeah. Activity schedule, hands-on activity, more information, the backstory. And Desiree's right, you know, with this 3-minute observation, it's not entirely fair, but it is kind of nice to start thinking about what might be in the range of possibilities. So some of y'all said, you know, some strategies we could like look at the hands-on, definitely look at some music. There you go. So we can start to come up with some not necessarily targeted instructions, but some ideas that might be helpful. Now, remember what I told you, she's nonverbal, she's institutionalized. Somebody taught her assistive and augmentative communication. And this is what I want to share with you that came out as a result of that.
Limited set of for the human mind.
Sorry.
Have assumed. The previous part. most of this video was in my native language. Many people have assumed that when I talk about this being my language, that means that each part of the video must have a particular symbolic message within it, designed for the human mind to interpret. But my language is not about designing words or even visual symbols for people to interpret. It is about being in a constant conversation with every aspect of my environment, reacting physically to all parts of my surroundings. In this part of the video, the water doesn't symbolize anything. I am just interacting with the water as the water interacts with me. Far from being purposeless, the way that I move is an ongoing response to what is around me. Ironically, the way that I move when responding to everything around me is described as being in a world of my own, whereas if I interact with a much more limited set of responses and only react to a much more limited part of my surroundings, people claim that I am opening up to true interaction with the world. They judge my existence, awareness, and personhood on which of a tiny and limited part of the world I appear to be reacting to. The way I naturally think and respond to things looks and feels so different from standard concepts or even visualization that some people do not consider it thought at all, but it is a way of thinking in its own right. However, the thinking of people like me is only taken seriously if we learn your language, no matter how we previously thought or interacted. As you heard, I can sing along to what is around me. It is only when I type something in your language that you refer to me as having communication. I smell things. I listen to things. I feel things. I taste things. I look at things. It is not enough to look and listen and taste and smell and feel. I have to do those to the right things, such as look at books, and fail to do them to the wrong things, or else people doubt that I am a thinking being. And since their definition of thought defines their definition of personhood so ridiculously much, they doubt that I am a real person as well. I would like to honestly know how many people, if you met me on the street, would believe I wrote this. I find it very interesting by the way that failure to learn your language is seen as a deficit, but failure to learn my language is seen as so natural that people like me are officially described as mysterious and puzzling rather than anyone admitting that it is themselves who are confused, not autistic people or other cognitively disabled people who are inherently confusing. We are even viewed as non-communicative if we don't speak the standard language, but other people are not considered non-communicative if they are so oblivious to our own languages as to believe they don't exist. In the end, I want you to know that this has not been intended as a voyeuristic freak show where you get to look at the bizarre workings of the autistic mind. It is meant as a strong statement on the existence and value of many different kinds of thinking and interaction in a world where how close you can appear to a specific one of them determines whether you are seen as a real person, or an adult, or an intelligent person, and in a world in which those determine whether you have any rights. There are people being tortured, people dying, because they are considered non-persons, because their kind of thought is so unusual as to not be considered thought at all. Only when the many shapes of personhood are recognized will justice and human rights be possible.
Comments, thoughts, reactions? Oh, absolutely. You can have the link. It is an amazing message. Now, See, what's even more impressive is that when you know who Amanda actually became. So Amanda was known as Mel Baggs. How many of y'all have heard of the term neurodiversity? She and a group of individuals are the ones who coined the term. She has spoken to the United Nations on the rights of disabilities. She has presented to White House. She's gone to Congress, not gone to. She's presented at Congress, and she is not just she's not just somebody who makes a video. She's eminent. She changed the world. When she talked about human rights, she was on the human rights subcommittee of the United Nations to advocate for individuals who think differently. Was very passionate about that. Now I use the past tense because unfortunately she died of COVID. But she has impacted the way that we see things. So when you use the term neurodiversity, you can thank Mel Baggs, that particular woman who, along with her colleagues, along with another group, helped create that term. They took a term from the 70s and then really put it out into the public knowledge. So she's incredible to me because you see her first video, you see the first bit and you go, okay, somebody taught her to talk, to communicate. And I'm using ableist language accidentally, and I keep trying to change my own ableist language. So somebody taught her to use communication. Somebody taught her voyeuristic freak show. Somebody taught her vocabulary. She was not somebody in the first 4 minutes that most people would go, oh, sign her up for gifted education. But I can assure you by the end of the video, you can absolutely see where you might want to provide an outlet for gifted education. So the idea of Ikigai for her was discovering something she was passionate about, something she was good at, and the world definitely needed her. And she got paid for it. She did find a way to get paid for it, and this wasn't all volunteer. And as a speaker, she was an incredibly world-renowned speaker, communicator. And again, I apologize for my ableist language. I'm working on it, but I'm aware of it. And when we think about the impact of a twice exceptional individual, and we go looking for strengths, so twice exceptional kids, according to the Association for the Gifted Division of the Council for Exceptional Children, use the definition of they experience exceptional ability and disability. So it is the two together. There is both disability and exceptional ability. And what happens is that they can, the ability may dominate and it can hide the disability. So generally these are kids who may not get diagnosed until middle school or high school or even college with a processing disorder or some sort of issue that they can cope, but they're not able to grow in quite as much as they could because of the impact of the disability, but we just don't discover it early. Sometimes their disability dominates, and oh, by the way, oh my gosh, there's this ability that we often don't know how to deal with. What most kids happen is that one masks the other, so that they're what I call ducks, that they're paddling like crazy under the surface to look normal, to look typical, to look like a kid who doesn't have this ability and disability that's sort of working with each other. And they do come from and are impacted by neurological, linguistic, socioeconomic, individual, and cultural diversity. So we talk about twice exceptional, which has the ability and disability. And then we often talk about thrice exceptional, which adds in an external component of multilingual or cultural diversity. I'm going to focus primarily on twice exceptional, but I wanted to acknowledge the component of thrice exceptional, which has an external difference from what is expected in education or the society. So I want y'all to think about, when we talk about twice exceptional kids, there are a lot of people who don't believe in twice exceptional. I didn't even know these kids existed. A friend of mine from special education said, you don't really believe in twice exceptional until you meet a twice exceptional kid. And it helps to explain to others what twice exceptionality is. So I want y'all to think about, and I want you to put in the chat kind of what metaphor you see. If you're going to explain to somebody what kind of metaphor is useful to you, do you see twice exceptional kids as an interaction of systems? Do you see them as a complicated math or chemistry problem? And I don't use problem as in problem, but as in something to factor system, a math or chemistry system. Do we think about an endangered, mysterious sort of animal? How about a mythological creature of two different parts, like a sphinx or a hydra, where we put these two parts together and it's something mythological? Dramedy, where you've got comedy and dramedy. Or do you think about behavior in terms of the actions of a twice exceptional child? Somebody said that they're like a tradromedy, which is, a significant interaction. So when the term twice exceptional is different than the term multi-exceptional. So multi-exceptionality has to do with special education. You've got, ADHD and learning disabilities. Twice exceptional has this interaction between a really significant talent and a really impactful disability. And so that interaction is sort of interesting. What do y'all think is a good metaphor that you sort of relate to? I'm going to explain them in just a moment, but I'd love to see you put in the chat some of those ideas. All right. Twice and thrice. Brilliant. There you go. I like the idea of brilliant. So there are the research has the history of twice exceptional has several different metaphors, and I think metaphors are really important. So Susan Baum, who essentially started twice exceptional, she writes about it isn't easy being green. She talks about the yellow of the gift and the blue of special education and the disability, and that together they make green. It's a separate color, but it's combined and connected with the same two colors. So this idea of twice exceptional kids being green is definitely a metaphor that she talks about, this interaction between the gifted education and special education, and how does that, what does that look like? So Eleanor van Gerven from the Netherlands talks about twice exceptional kids almost as a math issue. That you've got the gift plus you have the disability, and yet somehow the sum is greater than the sum of the total is greater than the sum of the parts. So you can't have a kid go to gifted ed from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning and then go to special ed from 11 to 12:30 and consider it done. That's not how it works. So it is this complicating, this additional component of additive component that she talks about. So at Cleveland State, we talk about bees. And the reason we talk about bees is because I've always been kind of fascinated by bees, and the phrase of bees that started in the 1930s, that bees shouldn't be able to fly. It's aerodynamically impossible for bees to fly. And the Bee Movie talks about that according to all known laws of aviation, there's no way a bee should be able to fly. Its wings are too small. The bee, of course, flies anyways, because bees don't care what humans think is impossible. I've heard that NASA has a very similar phrase too. And it wasn't until 2004, which is 20 years ago, but if you think about the thousands of years that we've worked with bees, and we haven't known how they fly, that they shouldn't be able to fly. But about 20 years ago, Caltech scientists finally discovered how bees fly. And what they discovered is that they don't follow the rules of aviation. They follow their own rules. And what they do is they spin their wings in figure eights. And so the spin of the wings in figure eights, these little stubby wings, creates vortices or, hurricanes or typhoons underneath their wings. And so that very small agitated air lifts the bees. They shouldn't be able to fly. One of the scientists said, "This is not how I would design a bee. It is not efficient, and yet somehow it manages to be effective." So when we think about twice exceptional, I really like the idea of bees are twice exceptional. They have their wings are too short, their bodies are too big. They shouldn't be able to fly, but they're gifted. They figured out a way to make they can figure out a way to make things happen. And they just create disturbances around them. If you know a twice exceptional kid, you'll understand that it's a poor joke, but this idea of they often will go their own way. So one of the major differences is that bees are gonna fly. A bee is gonna fly. but a twice exceptional kid has to have a teacher. And so in order for a twice exceptional kid to fly, they've got to have a teacher. And it's the role of the teacher that I find really, really fascinating. So the definition of twice exceptional put out by TAG is that you have to have advanced, enriched opportunities beyond what is offered in the typical classroom. It's because twice exceptional kids need things that are beyond what is typically offered, that develops their interest, gifts, and abilities. Now, really, all kids, every kid needs to have a curriculum that extends their interest, gifts, and talents. Twice exceptional kids will often be even beyond what is age or grade appropriate, and then also meets their learning needs. So it is this dual focus on the advancement plus the support. And that's where I talk about the goal for twice exceptional education is that we want to develop the ability first. According to Ikigai, we do the things that we are interested in, that we are passionate about, that we love, and we're good at. There is nowhere that it says that we're going to work on the things we're not good at. And so, but we also want to mediate the impact of the disability. So disabilities create barriers, and we want to mediate that impact of those barriers. I want y'all to watch the end of average. I don't have time to really do it right now, but the end of average basically says that comes out of a study from the 1950s of the Air Force that redefined the creation of the cockpit into extending to the edges. What is the top, what is the edges, both from a back to go backwards and forwards. So when you get into your car tonight and you change your seat, you adjust your seat forwards and backwards, up and down, that came out of the technology from the Air Force that was adjusting the cockpit for pilots. Now we can do the same for curriculum. We can do the same for education. And it's that extension and how do we reach the edges of all students.
Welcome to 5 more minutes. Helpful videos and
because that one of course works.
There. 5 minutes.
And it's and I will send you the links for these.
Welcome to
why is technology working difficult for me? All right. So what's really fascinating about working to the edges is that we have strategies for that. We call it universal design for learning. Universal design for learning normally focuses on kids who are struggling at the bottom, but it's the removal of barriers. But truly using universal design for learning is basically the idea of how do we promote and enrich and connect kids to content, working around the barrier. So UDL is fascinating because it basically takes, so if you've got your, it uses the brain-based process of learning of the very first place that learning happens is information comes up through the brainstem, the sensory information, the words, the vision, all the senses come up. And the very first place it hits is the emotional center of the brain. It's not vocabulary, it's not words, it's not any of that. It hits the emotions first. So we have to engage kids first, and we have to get them with something they're interested in, something that attracts them, novelty, something that makes them feel. Then, once they feel a certain way about content, about a curriculum, about a lesson, then they pull in memory, vocabulary memory, visual memory, what they learned before. And so they start making connections all over their brain about what they know about the content. So it's so important. That's why we talk about we build off of prior knowledge. There has to be prior knowledge there in that brain. And then the frontal lobe coordinates the whole process and allows kids to express what they know or how they've made sense of it. So it's a process of the brain, and universal design for learning takes each of these stages and talks about how disability impacts the processing in each of those stages. So it could be a sensory deficit, it could be a memory issue, it could be a behavior issue, it could be an emotional issue that impacts the processing that's going on there. So when we think about disability, all disability is a series of barriers to learning efficiently. Now, giftedness is really learning advanced and effectively. So it's the effective and efficiency part. So the barriers impact the effectiveness and efficiency, but talent and strengths. And remember what I can't come back to. I'm going to keep saying this. Both gifted education and special education are essential education for some kids, but it's good education for almost all kids. So what's really fascinating is when we think about gifted ed and special ed, these are two different systems that came around because the needs of kids weren't being met. We had some kids who were not learning, whose learning needs, who were sitting in classrooms and not learning. And so the fields of gifted ed and special ed came about because of these inability of the general classroom to meet the needs of these kids. Now, what's interesting is that they have different, so these two different fields have very different histories and goals. So the goal of gifted education is to move kids away from typical. They are performing at typical, and we want them to extend, enriched, advanced. We want them to be able to move at a pace and at a depth and at a complexity that is faster than typical kids. Now, what's interesting about special education is that the goal is to bring kids closer to typical, that we want to close the gap, that we're looking at closing a gap. Gifted education doesn't want to close a gap. They want to move. They just want to move forward. So both of them are moving forward, but where they're moving to is considered very different. So gifted education is very good. It comes out of a deficit, it comes out of a strength space. What does a kid do? What are they? They have significant learning needs based off of strengths, whereas special education comes out of significant learning needs based out of deficits, a problem in communication, a problem in language, a problem in attention. And so the word problem indicates a deficit. Gifted ed has struggled for years to get services. When we talk about, well, we got to bring kids up, these are kids who also need to learn. They also have the right to learn, but they have fought for services in order to learn at their level. Special education has a history of exclusion. I'm sorry, I can't teach those kids. They're too hard. They're too low. They're too whatever. And so special ed has fought to get in the general classroom, whereas gifted education has fought to get out of the general education classroom. There is a nasty little history in gifted ed of underrepresenting people from diverse backgrounds. We tend to recognize kids who do well in school and kids who do well in school. Now, giftedness does not always equate with doing well in school, but most people think of giftedness as doing well in school. So we tend to overrepresent kids who look like what school is designed for. White, middle, upper class, males tend to be very overrepresented in gifted ed. Special ed tends to be underrepresented in kids who do well in school. So it tends to overrepresent kids from linguistic backgrounds, multilingual backgrounds, culturally diverse backgrounds, and kids who are not doing well in school. So there tends to be a very different orientation. Now, what's really interesting is that the words can be very similar. So gifted ed uses the term acceleration, which means moving ahead. They're sitting in 5th grade. They're doing 7th grade math. Let them do 7th grade math. We're moving them to algebra next year. Acceleration means moving ahead. In special ed, particularly these days, acceleration means I'm sitting in 5th grade. I'm doing math at 2nd grade. I need to do more than a year's worth of material in a year. So I need to accelerate the learning so that I can catch up, which means that I'm not moving ahead in an enriched fashion. I am moving ahead quickly, covering the essentials. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. Gifted ed talks about compacting. We do a pretest. Oh my gosh, they know 85% of the material. We'll just fill in the gaps, and then we have time. We bought ourselves time through compacting. We can do enrichment. We can do research. We can do independent study. There's all kinds of things we can do with this extra time. In special ed, compacting means that we're going to hit the essential pieces. We're going to just hit the essential concepts and keep moving forward quickly. There is no time. And of course, they both use the term differentiation. So same language, very, very different meanings. Now, what's really hard about twice exceptional kids is that they may not qualify for either gifted ed or special education. They may not be high enough for special ed, For gifted ed, they may not be low enough for special ed. I've heard so many times, oh, we only look at below grade level. And I'm like, nope, you need to look at impact on learning. You don't look at, is it below a certain level? You need to look at impact on learning, but each state has a different definition. Gifted ed tends can be too fast-paced. Plus, they tend to look at averages. So we look at an overall IQ as opposed to the subtests. Special ed tends to be very more slow-paced or overly structured. Gifted ed assumes that, of course, you can read these and we'll do all these exciting activities based off of skills a twice exceptional kid may not have. And special ed is very focused on what they can't do without promoting what they can do. So what's really interesting, though, is when you start looking at the two different systems. So gifted education curriculum focuses on the curriculum. They focus a lot on what happens in that content, providing critical thinking, creative thinking, enrichment, acceleration, complexity. So gifted education is very strongly defined by curriculum. Special education is very strongly defined by access and support to the curriculum. And then the processes by which we require and provide support, the access and support. Both of them focus on assessment. Both of them focus on social emotional behavior. Both of them talk about individual differences. So there's some very interesting similarities and some really interesting significant differences. I wanted to move very quickly into the idea of this, of Ikigai, because what Ikigai can do, is I want to think about, when we think about twice exceptional kids and planning for twice exceptional kids, we want to think about how do we remove the barrier? Some of y'all may have seen this has been around for a long time, that some kids, there's differences in kids. We don't want to provide the same thing. Everybody gets what they need, but it's even better if we can just remove the barrier and let kids be what they are, be who they are. And so when we think about what these barriers are for twice exceptional kids, for kids with disabilities, they have memory issues, they have behavior challenges, they may have visual supports, they may need reading challenges, they may have physical challenges, they may need hands-on learning. We need to provide choices. So when we think about these barriers, how do we reduce barriers? We can teach a lot of strategies. And here's where it gets exciting, because AI can help with that planning process. So here's a prompt, for example. I need a lesson plan for 5th grade English using a state of Hawaii standard that is differentiated to include memory supports, positive behavior, visual supports, opportunity for movement, a range of reading levels, critical thinking, creativity, be active and engaging, and provide choices through UDL. Provide an explanation of what's occurring. I challenge y'all to put that in to Copilot or ChatGPT or something. You'll be amazed at what you come back with. Because what you do is that we are able to extend to those issues. Now, I want you to think about coming back to this idea of Ikigai. We ask questions of kids. We ask questions in our curriculum, in our content. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? What does the world need? How do you feel about the work you're doing? When have you ever had an impact on others? You matter to somebody, and what you do matters. And so this issue of matters and Ikigai and thinking about purpose is essential for twice exceptional kids. Good for all kids, but essential for twice exceptional kids. I'm going to end. I'm going to get some questions here because I'm racing through time. Shameless plug. If anybody is interested in getting a graduate certificate in twice exceptional education, we offer it. As I said, we are the only twice exceptional teacher education. There is a wonderful program through Bridges Academy that looks at neurodiversity and advocacy. We focus on education and teachers. And so we have a graduate certificate program. We also have a master's in online curriculum. So it's all online. And very shameless plug, we have a conference coming up. It is hybrid, which means that if you can't leave Hawaii, we have people coming from Africa. We have people coming from Belgium. We have people coming from around the world. But we also have a number of people who will be calling in through Zoom. and participating in our Twice Exceptional Teacher Education Conference, September 19th through 20th. If you have questions, email me at 2e@csuohio.edu. So there's my shameless plug for both of those. I want to end with Ikigai because I cannot tell you how fortunate I am that I get to teach in my area of Ikigai. I am passionate about Twice Exceptional kids. I am passionate about being able to both extend and support. I'm good at that, at seeing those connections. I think the world absolutely needs people to understand more about Twice Exceptional kids. And I'm not paid extremely well, but I sure would love to come to Hawaii. But at least I'm paid for it, and it is my job. And so I get to live in the place of bliss of my Ikigai. I really hope for y'all that you also get to live in your Ikigai, because teachers who have found Ikigai are even more passionate about helping kids get there. And so thank you very, very much. If you have questions, if you have comments, please email me at 2e@CSU Ohio, Cleveland State University, Ohio .edu. And I thank you very, very much for your time and appreciation today. Thank you all. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I'm out of time, very close, but I'm happy to answer a question or some.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hughes. That was such an interesting presentation. I learned a lot. What's still staying with me is about the bees. I had no idea, and going to share that with my own kids in the future. But if you're okay staying back a little bit to entertain some
Absolutely.
questions, that'd be really wonderful. Anyone have any questions, please leave them in the chat right now. I also am putting into the chat a link to our post-session survey. If you can complete that, that would be so helpful for not only our funding, but also so that we can figure out what sessions that we can hold in the future, what's interesting to you folks, what would be helpful in our community. So please complete the post session using the short URL in the chat, and also leave any questions there. While we're waiting for that, I do want to thank you again, Dr. Hughes. I know that you had so much trouble with CrowdStrike and the Microsoft, especially in your area, and just so fortunate that you kept working through many solutions in order to be here today. And that took a lot of time, I know, and it was probably extremely frustrating, but thank you for not giving up and for being here today. I really
it worked,
appreciate it.
and
It
it was all
worked.
good. Yeah.
Yes.
We had significant internet issues around here, so you could see even in my presentation how it wouldn't let us cite, but it I've worked around it. Teaching
Yeah,
Twice
so
Exceptional kids, you got to be creative.
yes, yes, for sure. So thank you again.